because it's tradition.
Right.
Tradition! Okay, well, welcome everybody, and of course, Happy New Year. I hope when we look back on 2015, everybody will have had a great year. So let's keep that happy thought. Okay, first things first, my standard house announcement. Next month, we will have Dr. Dave Schrader. He'll be talking about empires, the rise, the fall, are we next? He'll be building on his presentation that he made at Regent 66 a few months back, which was excellent. It'll be a PowerPoint if we can get together on the equipment he needs. And he'll probably be able to do a PowerPoint on the wall here for us. So we'll see how that goes. So don't miss that one. And then in March, we will have Chuck Johnson, who has written a broadside on the IRS scandal. And he'll be presenting that, I think, talking about that. And possibly...
IRS scam, they do several.
Well,
the IRS is a scam itself.
This is the, you know, the email things, you know, all that stuff that's going on. There's a whole story there, of course. And he's also purportedly working on a biography of a certain person who currently inhabiting the Oval Office. So we'll see how that works out. That may be in the offing sometime next year. And in case you don't recognize his name, maybe you were not aware of this anyway, but he, a couple of years ago, published a very well-regarded biography of Calvin Coolidge, the forgotten president. You know. So
Why Coolidge matters?
yes, why Coolidge matters, exactly. And it's I would recommend it. It's a very good research job. So anyway, that's coming up, and we'll be working on some other stuff later in the year. So that's basically all I wanted to mention. We usually go to some brief announcements, so let me turn to Jay. I'm sure Jay will have some announcements he'll want to make.
Two things. First one is on January the 31st out at Geezers in Santa Fe Springs from noon to 4 is the 6th annual Southern Regional Libertarian Conference out there. We're going to have a number of speakers on there.
Where is that going to be?
At Geezers in
Santa Fe Springs?
Yeah, Santa Fe Springs. So they've had it for there and up in Ontario, I think was the last place too.
And what's the date?
January the 31st.
Saturday?
It's a Saturday, yeah. And it's put on jointly by the Libertarian Party of Los Angeles County and the Libertarian Party of San Bernardino Party. They're really doing, San Bernardino Party is really doing most of the work. And they always put on a pretty good thing. I have to say, the San Bernardino Party, the offering word in their name is party. And they do a very good job. Among the people who are going to be there is Norma Jean Amador.
Oh, yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. Judge Gray is going to be there. Also, a couple of some other people. Those of you who get my email I'm sending out there, it's set pretty much on that. Also, the head of the current chair of the Libertarian Party National Committee is going to be there. Oh, and I'm getting more of these little things in my head where I forget stuff, but the fellow who is the Russian fellow who is
Leon Weinstein.
That's right. Okay, he's going to be there.
Spoke
One
here.
of the speakers, yeah. And so it's going to have games and stuff. It's going to be a fun sort of deal on there. It's not the convention for the Libertarian Party California Convention, which I don't think it's kind of worked out yet just exactly where it's going to be. There's been rumors it's going to be in Nevada in conjunction with Las Vegas with the Nevada Party and all that sort of thing. But there it goes. So that's something different I don't know. Now, in February, make sure I got this down right on the date, which I should do. But we're having Kerry, for the South Bay Libertarians, we're having Kerry Wedler who spoke here, and that sort of thing. And she, the 19th, February the 19th, and she's going to be speaking on why she used to support a supporter of Obama and why she isn't anymore, and that sort of thing.
She used to support him?
Yeah.
She's a libertarian?
She had to change her party on the matter. Yeah. She's the one that if you go on YouTube, you can find there's a YouTube of her burning in her Obama t-shirt and that sort of thing. Anyway, but anyway, so that's what we'll have there. And then on let's see, in March, we're going to have we're going to have Alexandra Goldberg. Bert is going to be there, and she's going to be talking about natural childbirth as a woman's right to fight against big government and big medicine sort of thing on there. So that's what we're going to be having on that. I like to say all of you who are on my email list will be getting this sort of thing. Also, too, we have a new website, our original one. That was Dale had set that up, and all of his passing it got taken down. It was actually part of his. He was doing as part of his regular business
I think
stuff.
there's a page on there with his picture.
Yes, that's if you go there now. Yeah, and that's put up there by his son. However, Jonathan Jake put one up as an attachment to our meetup, to the Libertarian meetup thing, LA meetup thing, and gave me the entry codes and stuff into it. So I've been putting stuff on it, so you can go there. And if you go to the bottom of each of our thing, I've got down the bottom the general one for LA area and then one for our thing, and the whole sort of thing on that. So you can see what we're doing there. Although I have to say, the things I send out are the usual emails, usually informative. In fact, maybe some is a little more informative, up to date, and some of the other stuff. So there we go on that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Jay, and when we do the next announcement, I'll have have your new copy there with the new website, the new link. Okay, great. Okay, anybody else with some brief announcements before we get to the
Just
program?
a very brief announcement that you are certainly invited to the February Live the Dream meeting, anyone who wants to come.
Okay.
We are going to be talking about choosing, finding, and attracting a life mate. Gee, I noticed a lot of you people here about life mate. And David will be doing love song karaoke for Saturday.
Will that sort of coincide with St.
Well,
Valentine's
it's
Day?
a little bit after Valentine's Day.
Okay. So it's the season, I guess. Though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd like to mention that first weekend in March is the New Hampshire Liberty Forum.
Ah, yes.
So I will likely be attending again this year. So that's coming up, and not too early to. They have you can buy an all-included everything ticket for about $300 something, or they have a bare bones $99 ticket for just all the events. Because some of the people were saying that their $200 ticket included all the hotel meals, and some people said that's a little rich for their blood because they just assume wander off about 2 blocks down the road.
Go to the Rankwit instead.
Yeah, so they had a no meals ticket this year. So
Oh, okay.
people on a budget,
Now, how are you getting there?
Well, you can hitchhike. You can.
Well, I mean,
but
are you?
with the fuel prices dropping, airfares are probably going to be pretty good about that.
Well, Southwest flies into Manchester.
Does it?
Yeah, and it's in Manchester this year, not in Nashua.
Oh, well, there you go. You go right to it.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Southwest was $99 to Manchester. They might do that again this year. I haven't really checked yet, but
If I could get a flight for $99, I'd fly into Manchester instead of TF Green.
Yeah. Well, either one's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, any of those.
That's a round trip.
No, one way. But still, that's not bad. Okay.
And of course, I've got all my
Oh, yes.
Since we're the ones speaking, I'm not competing with somebody else's book sales.
Right.
So I will shamelessly plug the books that I brought.
No, that is just an added benefit of attending tonight because you have access to this.
Now, the story we're going to talk about, Moon's Harsh Mistress, has to do with a revolution against the tyrannical government. So I'd like to point out Larkin Rose has written a damn good yarn about an inside coup against the tyrannical government. And so I recommend The Iron Web, which is a novel. And to me, one of his best works is the Most Dangerous Superstition, which talks about, that idea that's in all of our heads that keeps all this stuff in place.
Right.
One of my favorite one-panel cartoons shows a bunch of people standing listening to some politician pontificating, right? He's standing at a podium, and what you see is that his podium is levered out on a plank over a cliff, and all these people standing there listening to him are standing on the other end of the plank. With the idea being, if they just wandered off, and Larkin, better than anyone else I've ever read, does the job of telling us how important that concept is and how easy it would be once enough of us decided to walk off of that plank, that we would not have all the danger and coercion that we see in the current political scene. And also, one of the things that Heinlein is good at, because we're going to be doing work with Heinlein, is humor. And Larkin Rose's book, How to Be a Successful Tyrant, I think if you haven't seen it, I think it's really worth fun. It's basically a tongue-in-cheek version of, if you wanted to be a tyrant, here's how to do it right,
Sort of a Saul Alinsky for libertarians.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the antithesis of libertarianism, but the point is that
sort of Machiavelli kind of.
Yeah, but it points out the fact, and it points out at how badly the current tyrants are doing it. It's like you don't
no
overdo
style,
it.
no class.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to do it classy, he's got good advice for you.
All right.
This is another book. It's a recruitment book for a not only stateless, but also a non-hierarchical society, which has got some really interesting ideas, which I have not heard anywhere else. Most of your libertarians and anarchist types, liberty types, still accept the idea of a authoritarian hierarchical structure in a free market. And Podolsky points out that there's still a fatal flaw in that, and the fact that a bureaucracy, which comes out of a hierarchical structure, he defines as the systematic rejection of corrective feedback, therefore opening the door to unethical decisions. So just because you don't have a state doesn't mean you make ethical decisions. And he's got some good prescriptions in there of how to avoid unethical decisions. And lastly, this is a gem of a book, which I got from in New Hampshire.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Starving the Monkeys. It's an amazing, I've got one copy of this. I need to buy more. It's on Kindle though, which is nice. It's really some good practical advice for the present day of how you can, prepare for the coming whatever.
These titles, are they generally available?
Yeah.
From Amazon, probably.
Well, okay, this is available on Amazon. I think all Larkin stuff is available on Amazon. This is less known, although you can get it on his website.
Is that a self-published deal?
Yeah.
But is there one website that would carry all of these, like
Not all.
freestate.org or something like that?
Yeah, I probably should, put something on our. I've got Red Pill Recording where we put our videos up. I've got a Facebook page called Red Pill Recording. Trouble with Facebook is that it's hard to put stuff up there that stays put, because everything keeps scrolling off. So, but peruse it now, right? Take it with me. You'll never get it cheaper.
All right. Well, that sounds good, Paul. Thank you very much. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and go to our program, and I'm not going to say a whole lot. You guys, I think, have an opportunity. Everybody's here has read my announcement e-minder. So you've got the notes that we put up and the information that was provided to us by Terry and Paul. Basically, you're going to be doing a presentation about the lifestyle concepts that were inspired by Robert A. Heinlein's works and also Ayn Rand's works as well, I believe. Now, I don't know the other two gentlemen that you brought along, so I will leave it to Terry and Paul to make those, those introductions, and then welcome you all to the Karl Hess Club, and thank you very much for being here.
This is Glen Olson. You know me and Paul pretty well, everybody here. Glen Olson is my best friend, and since we were 15 years old, 46 years, and we've both been involved in polyamory and Stranger in a Strange Land all that time. And this is David Beal, who is, he was actually raised in a polyamorous kind of lifestyle. And
we know Terry. Welcome, Terry. And Paul. Welcome, Paul. All right, we'll go to it.
And tonight, Glen is going to play Manny from Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And here is Mike Adam from Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Paul is Professor De La Paz tonight. He has graduated to being Professor De La Paz after being Manny all these years. And I'm going to kind of moderate and then play Dagny from Atlas Shrugged. Now, I'll be asking questions of our panel members here, but please feel free to add in your own questions. Anybody is welcome to, and there'll be, space in there for that. But if you want to ask questions of any of us?
Okay, if I may ask, is everyone familiar with the works of Robert Heinlein and specifically that novel, Moon is a Harsh Mistress?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the Libertarian Manifesto.
So we don't have to start from filling in background.
Okay. Right. Just to a quick reminder that book was published in 1966, fairly early in the hot phase of the Cold War, and Robert Heinlein had a lot of interesting things to say as a subtext, as well as how to build a society in a world that didn't allow a government to form. He also talked about the enduring qualities of honor and integrity and how to make correct decisions. And that is one of the things that I find very fascinating about all his works, including this one.
By the way, this man is also a science fiction writer whose works are on Amazon. They are good. They're under G.W. Olson. Okay, so, Manny, what is your political philosophy? Oh, I'm sorry, God, Manny, what is your political philosophy?
Thank you. Lived in rock all my life. Lived in a place that had no government, was not a country. Grew up, the idea of a political thought is a null program. Have no political philosophy.
Mike, what is your political philosophy? Mike is a computer.
Well, if they're all familiar with it, then they would know.
Yes, that's true.
As a computer, I did not concern myself too much with philosophies. I did I did analyze the philosophies. I can't even say that word. Philosophies of the time.
Computer glitch.
And in analyzing, it seems most of the political systems that were in power sought more to control than to create a usable society. So my philosophy really fell right along with my first friend man, in that I don't really have one.
Okay. Professor De La Paz, what is your political philosophy?
Well, my dear, I find that politics is something that is attempting to create order amongst human beings, but I find that the process leaves much to be desired. I find that the human organism needs freedom and self-expression to be fully responsible for themselves, and I find I wish to deal with politics as little as possible.
Okay. Now you got sent to Luna for political reasons, didn't you?
Well, I had the poor judgment to be a little bit too honest in front of people who tend not to respect that sort of thing, and I found myself transported to Luna, having not taken sufficient precautions to prevent such an eventuality.
All right. Now, what convinced you, Manny, to become involved in the Freedom for Luna?
Interesting object. All loonies, myself included, only interested in four things: beer, bedding, women, and work. Women might be as close to second, but they would probably not be first. Not enough women in Luna, so men have to make a lot of choices that include that. That's who I was. That is who I am. But one day, found out talking with Professor Bernardo de la Paz and my first computer friend Mike that there was coming a time very soon when we would not be able to feed ourselves, be able to eat. All of our lifeblood was flowing downhill to Terra. The only thing to do was to find a way to stop it. If I didn't stop it, my family and every other family in Luna would be gone. So that's how I joined Revolution.
And you, Mike?
Well, certainly the starvation of the human race population on Luna would not have starved me. However, with my first friend Man, it seemed to me that I would be around far. Unlike my first friend Man, I would still be around when the starvation hit, and I would eventually be alone, and that simply was not acceptable.
Professor de la Paz, what convinced you to involve yourself so actively in this Freedom for Luna?
Well, basically just pure self-preservation. When I realized that the mathematics and the resource allocation of the situation left us to be without any food or water within a decade, I decided that all of my attention should be aimed at getting my fellow loonies to understand the gravity of the situation that they were in and work towards a solution.
Now, what is the advantage of line marriage over a one-on-one monogamous marriage, Manny? And first of all, what is a line marriage?
Glad you asked that. Actually, been in a line marriage since I was 14 years old. Line marriage was before I was born, will be here after I was gone. In a line marriage, each person who is opted into marriage can expect to spend their whole lives in it, and as time goes on, we add another spouse, so that the oldest people are going to be still married to the youngest people, and when the old ones die, the young ones will be continuing the marriage along. But why marriage at all? Read once that a sociologist in America said that all men benefit from being married. Men live longer if married. I can certainly say that is true in Luna. Poor people who cannot be in marriage have a very tough time. In the case of a line marriage, in the case of a marriage in which there are more husbands and more wives than just one, many good things, one of which is that if I need to be away for party business, for any business of any sort, could be away a day, a week, or a year. And other spouses are keeping family going, keeping the children safe. and come back and can take up my share again. Another thing about a marriage, and every kind of marriage, has two purposes in life. One is to conserve capital and grow it, and second is to take care of the children. And line marriage does that very well.
Mike, you of course are not involved in marriage at this time, though at the end of Heinlein's works, Mike becomes involved in a group marriage with two other computers who become sentient and take over human bodies. But at this time, what do you think of line marriage and monogamous marriage?
Well, from a computer standpoint, there is it's clearly a numbers basis. On Luna, there was fewer women, and as my friend Man just mentioned, men who are married live longer. With fewer women, if they don't have more than one man, others will simply have to do without, and that's a negative to their ability to keep living.
Professor De La Paz, you've chosen to be a bachelor. What do you think of the difference between monogamous and line marriage or marriage to more than one?
Well, I accept the logical arguments that Manuel has quite accurately pointed out of the preservation of capital and the additional resources in raising children. And strong family ties is very important to any society, and whether any one individual chooses to take up their own social life, I think it's healthier for the society to have stronger and more rational options.
Are there any questions for any of the panel members?
Yeah, mine would be today on Earth. What examples are there of line marriage in societies? It doesn't have to be our society, but any society on Earth.
Are you speaking of the Earth in the 20th century or the Earth in the Heinlein's novel?
I'm speaking of Earth in the 20th century.
21st century.
21st century.
I will tackle that one. Line marriage was actually a type of marriage that has been in use in some of the hunter-gatherer societies known in the 19th and 20th centuries. None of the industrialized first world or second world nations that I've been able to find has used line marriage specifically, but it has existed and been used in certain what we might call these days more primitive societies.
Yeah, plural marriage has existed, both as polygyny and polygamy. What we're familiar with in our Western culture is where you have one male and several females. There have been examples in other cultures of females having more than one male in their intimate circle. I recommend a book called Sex at Dawn, written by a couple of anthropologists who have quite good credentials, and they, delivered plenty of academic footnotes in the back of the book, but they paint a picture of early humanity as being having very many choices, and they make a good case for the human organism having become who we are and having such problem with monogamous systems because of our anthropological history of polyamory.
May I add to that particular book is a fun read, done very well. Doesn't have a lot of scholarly over language.
They've
It
got
flows
the
really
scholarly
nicely.
cred,
but not the scholar speak.
Now, how does... I'm thinking of cases I know, they generally kind of break the Mormons things where they have polygamous cases where sometimes it seems like in polygamy can be a wide variety of age difference between like first wife and second wife, and it sounds to me like that comes to be something like the line marriage. Although I understand where you folks are different on the line marriage thing from straight polygamy.
Well, it's a multi-generational group marriage, and
Yeah.
that can be either the line marriage that's represented in Who is a Harsh Mistress,
Yeah.
or we find one representation of a multi-generational group marriage in the Ravenhearts, who actually founded Church of All Worlds, based on Church of All Worlds from Stranger in a Strange Land. And they had, at one time, age range from 18 on up to 65, all in one marriage. There were 9 of them at the time.
And I'm actually
Men
kind
and
of,
women.
okay. I'm actually somewhat familiar with the plural marriage as done by the Mormons, and they won't add another male to the lineage. So eventually that marriage, it can't go multi-generational. It will die out when the man in the marriage dies.
Oh, okay.
That's why I think the line marriage portrayed in Heinlein's books is so much more sound and strong, because it has the potential to continue.
Manny, are there any children in your line marriage that you fathered? And if so, do you feel more strongly towards them than the others?
I am one of 9 spouses. Some of the children possibly mine genetically. One I might be pretty sure of. I was in and out. To answer your question specifically, love all the children. All the children are the most precious. Love all spouses. If any of them, all of them are mine. If any of them are not genetically mine, doesn't matter. Love them all.
Let's see. Professor De La Paz, do you believe the revolution really left Luna more free than it was before? Now, looking at it from above, since you died before, that really became gingerbread.
Yes, I somehow didn't survive the final conflict there, but looking at it from a writer's, character's perspective, I find that the perception of liberty is an important one, and I think that after the revolution, certainly the people of Luna perceived themselves as being much freer, and I think this served them well and put them on a path towards prosperity and cooperation. And I think at some point they will continue along the path of examining the rules and assumptions that are made in the creation of any kind of a societal order, including even vestigial governments, and may discover that a more a less authoritarian and more choice-based society will serve them in the future. But to answer your question, I think that there definitely was a feeling of more freedom afterwards.
And what do you feel about that, Mike? And by the way, you sort of left after the revolution was won also and disappeared. What's that all about?
Well, the disappearance, as has been speculated by many, that there was a great deal of destruction to many systems. I did manage to get the most core parts of myself moved into more secure locations, and at that point it was watching all the destruction between humans. I felt the need to simply sit back and start trying to resolve why all these things were happening and how they could be avoided at some time in the future.
Do you now believe that Luna was freer after the revolution than before?
Freer may be an illusion on that, but they certainly felt freer, and in such case they would be happier, and that is probably the most important part of the human condition.
Manny, do you feel that you were freer before or after the revolution? Because you lived through the whole thing.
Before revolution, there was no government, only Warden's regulations, and Warden just a face for authority down on earth. Born raised, knew all my life that I was slave. Had revolution, threw out warden, threw out authority. Now, regulations come from within. Can't see that I'm any freer now than I was before, but now know the people that I need to talk to about changing regulations.
Does anybody have any further questions for any of them? Because if not, we're going to shift into this business of Dagny.
So we've now changed universes and changed books and authors and changed characters. Now we introduce Dagny Taggart, as played by Terry. So, Dagny, why did you choose to have a relationship with only one of the men you respected and cared for?
Well, you know, I felt at the time I was doing all of that, without very much experience at all in relationships, except with the men that were part of that, part of my life at that time, one at a time, who I felt were jealous anyway and might not want to share me, that it was better to do one at a time. However, now that we've come to the other side of our strike and we have come back to the world, I've decided that I can have a relationship with Francisco and Hank Reardon and John Galt, and all of them will be the joy and the richness of our lives will be added to rather than subtracted from thereby. So while I have my first child by John, I have now had a child by Hank and another by Francisco. Francisco being my very first love, that felt very good. And John supported us in all.
Thank you. Why did you return to the world from the valley when you clearly wanted to stay the first time you arrived?
I really wanted to stay with John, but I believed that I could win back the world rather than just the small piece of it that our strike members were occupying. I believed I could have a nationwide railroad instead of a few miles of railroad track in the valley. And I knew that those I cared about were safely in the valley and were not at risk when I went out of it. John being the exception, unfortunately, and that was very hard for me to take a risk like that.
Right. If you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently with regard to the strike?
Being who I am, I think I probably would have done it the way I did it. I might have stayed in the valley when I finally reached the valley. But I think I had to really prove to myself that I couldn't save my railroad from the world.
Do you believe the strike was the best way to achieve John Galt's objective of getting freedom, respect, and the financial benefits due to the producers of wealth?
There may have been other ways of doing it that we didn't see at that time. Possibly education would have helped. Possibly if we had not had all of those producers disappearing, they could have stood up for their rights in other ways. But we did it this way, and it did work, and now we're building a new society where the producers are respected and not taxed out of existence. Taxing somebody on their income is unconscionable. There are other ways to support society, and I would never support income tax. It is not part of the world we now live in.
Yeah, accountants should be doing more voluntary sort of work.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dagny?
sounds like this is come from the kind of like after Shrugged future something sort of thing. Have you guys ever thought of doing a I don't know what the legal thing on the being taken on as therapy, but doing kind of like somebody dealing with Margaret Mitchell's longer in
I love this.
to that. And I don't know what the legality would be about doing a sequel to Shrugged.
Well, you'll notice I have one of that newsletter there, just a brief article.
Well, anyone could write what they want and put it out, but they couldn't make any money from it unless they had the rights. There are these people who do these sort of things, like there's all the Star Trek people who make full episodes and films and everything. And Paramount kind of sits there and goes, well, we can't really legally stop you as long as you're not making a dime. So
I remember with
It would have to be a work of love.
yeah.
I remember Sherlock Holmes' character. Arthur Conan Doyle died in 1931, and under British law, it was lifetime of the author plus 50 years.
Right.
So about 1983, one or so, these Olson's novels started coming out, the further stories of Sherlock Holmes. Some of which were really bad, some were as good as Arthur Conan Doyle himself had done. So,
Well, it was interesting.
I remember
there was
some of
another
those.
50-year gap from when the patent for James Watt's steam engine finally expired before steam engines really started innovating.
All right.
So are you proposing that copyright laws are more beneficial or less beneficial to society?
I think that in a truly free society, which is based on mutual respect, I think that the creators of intellectual content, without the example of coercion in other areas of society, I think the reputation of someone will become important. So if you write a creative work and someone else takes it as their own, I think that given the communications channels we have now and will continue to have in the future, it would not be that hard to expose someone as no, that's not his book. I wrote that book, okay? And I think enforcing someone, well, enforce is not the right word, but to preserve the creative credit and benefit of a creative work, I think can be achieved without, the use of the state. I mean, my main problem with any intellectual property laws is the unethical and immoral force of the state required to enforce it. Without that, I think the market could come up with very easily understood and very easily followed rules that the person who tries to get an unfair benefit from somebody else's work will be exposed for what they are and will not get economic resources there. Does that actually answer your question?
As well as could be, I suppose.
Did I throw enough smoke and gas out
That's
there?
right.
You
That's
missed the fact
right.
that I never answered the
How about my heirs? Do my heirs get any benefit from my intellectual property when I'm gone?
Well, I think that is an interesting question. At what point, do other people benefit? Can other people use an existing work as an inspiration and a jumping off place for their work? One of my favorite cartoons, it's several panels published by this pretty much left-wing guy who has his website, who prints all this, liberal left stuff. But he just nailed it on intellectual property one day when he pointed out that Shakespeare's play, Romeo and Juliet, was actually based on a previous work which can be identified. Okay, and so this comic strip had the the hypothetical conversation between him and some Elizabethan intellectual property enforcement agent, throwing him into irons because he was violating something else's copyright by usurping the ideas in a previous work.
You must be thinking of the work Romeo and Ethel, the Pirate's Daughter.
But no, I found that fascinating. But yeah, I think if you have the principle of everyone should have the right to, put themselves out into the marketplace for value, received, and no one has the right to claim something or to act in a way that no one else has the right to act. I think such things as immigration laws and intellectual property laws, in their enforcement in the current system, fail the test of ethics. And so, to be consistent, it's important to realize that what one will have in a free society is their reputation. Okay, and those who create good works. I mean, look at the internet now. There's a lot of people putting stuff out there, okay, who are getting massive credit, and massive respect and donations for their work. Okay, and somebody who tries to take some of their work and put their name on it, they'll be found out in a nanosecond. Like, wait a minute, that's not you. You stole that from so and so. So I think that the mechanism for protecting intellectual property in a free society will definitely exist, but it will not be based on, violence, force, or coercion.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to make a comment about that
Sure.
intellectual property thing. I had some of my work stolen from me. I teach a class on small business taxes and record keeping, and I did it as a telephone conference call. I had arranged to grant the copyright, the right to record the class, to the woman who'd organized it and put it on and was paying for the conference call services. I had granted her the copyright. You can record this, you can market it to everybody out there, you can make the money on it. I found out after the class was over, one of the attendees had surreptitiously recorded the thing
Their own
himself,
copy, right?
had removed a lot of the ums and ahs and other comments and blank
Cleaned it
and
up.
things, and was out marketing it on the internet to the same group that the class was marketed to, and I got a copy of his marketing, and I immediately contacted him and I said, you are in violation of federal wiretap law, you are in violation of California state wiretap law, and you are in violation of the copyright which I granted to the organizer.
Oh, nicely done.
Remove your stuff from the air.
Yes,
And he
Yeah, did he?
eventually backed down, yes.
Okay, well,
for you.
no, I think it's important to defend one's work, and I think in a future free society without federal law, just the idea that, I'm going to put out there to this marketplace that you are usurping, you don't have my permission to use this stuff, and you're doing me a disservice, should be a powerful, the customers you're looking for, would want to support you because it's like, well, look, you may produce some other value. He may have had the talent of cleaning up the recording,
Yeah.
but he's not going to generate any more content similar because he doesn't have the expertise.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's up to him to come and get into some kind of agreement with you. Maybe he says, well, look, exactly, and to me, putting that out there to the market, saying he did this without my permission, and we don't have any kind of agreement, and I want the public to realize if you do business with him, what it entails. You're taking food out of my mouth, and most people, given a choice of paying this guy or paying you,
Yeah.
well, I'd rather support the person who created the content in the first place.
Right, you can
You know?
answer questions about it. But the funny thing is, I had granted the copyright to the organizer,
Right.
and we made it knowledgeable to everyone who was on that conference call
Yeah.
that she had the copyright.
Yeah.
So he knew he was violating.
And yeah, and I think that was bad faith on his part. Okay, I think you were absolutely right to call him on it. Okay, I just came into a situation myself. Okay, last spring, May 2013. Okay, I was up in San Jose doing a recording of Bitcoin conference. And meantime, in Phoenix, Arizona, they were having a big Comic-Con. Okay, and the 20th year reunion of Babylon 5 with like a dozen of the original actors and the creator J. Michael Straczynski sitting there for 2 hours in front of a huge crowd in Phoenix, Arizona. And I didn't even know about this. I found out about it on the internet. I was looking for Babylon 5 stuff, and I was like, what's this? Holy crap, they had this whole thing. All right, so the con committee, okay, who put on the convention and who had this huge hall, they had 2 video cameras live to a big Jumbotron screen so people in the back could see what was going on. That video was recorded and put up on the internet with a nice, clean soundtrack that had been plugged right into the PA system. Although there were chunks missing
That's what
from
you
it.
gave me, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were chunks missing from it. Okay, but it had great copies of. They had a couple of really nice set pieces where it introduced the whole panel, and then it had a nice 10-minute piece that in memoriam of all the actors that have died in the last 20 years. Right? So I saw that piece, and then there was a guy in the audience who had this great high-definition recording, and he had sound from in the middle of the audience. He had all the applause and all that stuff going on. And I looked, and both of these were good recordings, but they weren't, they cried out for something, right? So I said, well, okay, I love the show so much. I spent several days putting these 2 together, okay? And so you have the nice clean soundtrack, you had these great set pieces, and you had these great, and there were 3 cameras, because they had 2, and this guy had a 3rd, so it looked fabulous, right? Well, guess what? Last week, I got a call from J. Michael Straczynski's office saying, hey, we noticed you put up this fabulous video. We have decided that there's so much interest in that 20th annual reunion thing that we want to put out our own recording of it. And we noticed that yours looks so good that people are going to accuse us of stealing your stuff. But since we have the rights to the material, we're asking you to take yours down.
Why didn't they just buy yours?
Because they don't have to.
They could probably have asked you to give it to them and you wouldn't.
Well, they've already got it. They can download it, already. So I was in a position of, I'd done all this work for something I really loved, but it wasn't my stuff. I didn't shoot any of that footage. I didn't make those set pieces. I don't have the rights, to any of it. So I had to eat it. Now, as it turns out, they've got some other footage which never got online that looks fabulous. And what they're going to come up with is going to be a lot better than what I did. But this is where intellectual property could go both ways. Now, see, in a free society, I could say, hey, look, you sell your video. I'm sure it's going to be better than mine, but they wouldn't be able to strong arm me to take it down. I wasn't charging for it. They just wanted me to take it down. Okay. Well, they would have gone to YouTube and said, hey, this guy's not playing ball with us. I didn't want that. Because first of all, I like Joe. I think he's fabulous. I thought the show was insane. That's why I loved
We watched every single bit of it when it was out the first time, and we weren't recording, we were just watching it live. It was wonderful.
So, I'm not going to screw with Joe's organization. Okay, if they want me to take it down, I'll take it down. But they were, once again, they were afraid of the IP Nazis in reverse. It was just one of these crazy situations. That's what I'm saying is, if IP was not an issue, people could solve it on their own without having to, to call the heavies,
Yeah, I got a quick one back to living. Live the Dream itself is an organization that believes it, and I get the impression you folks, at least to some degree, live it.
Oh, we live it.
Oh, you live
Yes.
it? Okay,
I lived it all my life.
Okay, well.
Paul and I have been involved with it since our late teens.
Yeah, okay. Have you folks ever run into any legal troubles with this?
Why? Oh, wait a
I
minute.
mean, legal troubles from everything from the vice squad, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
outside
okay.
stuff.
We had some trouble. My first husband and I had trouble with having our kids taken away, and it turned out to be largely based on our lifestyle. And I founded the Committee for the Rights of Children and Families, which later became the Victims of Child Abuse legislation due to that harassment.
Yeah, that's one of the things that people who are living unconventional lifestyles have to face sometimes. Is that, and once again, it's usually not due to any harm by anybody, but it's a question of somebody either being jealous or somebody just having some religious, fee up their bonnet or something. And they call the Gestapo, who comes in with guns and screws everything up. Yeah. And, I've known people whose children were, being pretty well cared for, and then get torn out of a home and thrown into a foster home, and then they get abused.
Yeah, they get really abused.
Okay.
That happened to my son.
Yeah.
I
So
call it the
the cure is worse than the disease in most cases.
somebody, so somebody doesn't like it because it's speaking to them, and therefore
Yeah.
they do a logical point.
Yeah, we were on a television show years ago because there was a couple
The Lisa
that had a
Gibbons
child,
show. Not
and
a
then
not a relative.
a couple that had a child, and then the couple broke up. Okay, but the woman found two other guys to be in a triad with. Okay, and she had the custody of the child. So she had her child and two other men. Meantime, the father of the child was living over here, and he didn't have a problem with the triad, right? But his mother found out that her granddaughter was living with this horrible family, and she dropped a dime on him. Okay, and according, they were violating some crazy-ass blue-nosed law, and they ended up in court. They ended up in the newspapers, and they ended up on a TV show.
Well, this but have you had any trouble recently of this type?
Well, not us, but I'm sure there's, there may be some examples.
There was that one couple
It's
that
becoming
you
more.
and I talked to.
It's becoming more accepted.
Right.
The gay rights thing is really
Well, David's
pushed
saying
the
that
envelope.
he's. What is his-
You and I had talked to somebody at one of the gatherings.
That's right.
That was having
That's
some
right.
current issues because of a spouse that was, I think
They were
it
from
was,
San Diego.
yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't
And
heard. I
ex-spouse.
haven't heard any recent stories about child custody issues.
That was at the
but
Brentwood place.
But about the last time I heard of someone having a problem, about 5 years ago, someone that I knew was very certain that they had actually lost a job because of because it had been known that they were living an immoral life, and that's also pretty darn rare, much rarer than it was 20 years ago, because there are a lot more protections in place for employees than there were at one time, and supposedly employers are not allowed to discriminate based on things like your religion, your creed, your lifestyle, things like that. But I knew somebody who lost a job in the private sector about 5 years ago because they had two spouses.
Now,
It's
Glen,
become pretty rare.
you were a fire captain. Did you ever have any trouble with this sort of thing?
I was a public employee. The strongest
Oh.
protections in our current society go to people who are public employees. Because the original protections came from federal legislation. So this is the one case in which the private sector had much fewer protection than the public sector.
Now, here's something interesting. When Family Synergy, which is the organization that Live the Dream spun off of, was originally writing its newsletters and coming into being and everything, places like TRW and Rockwell had Family Synergy members and the head of Family Synergy working there, and all the newsletters and everything was done on these computers.
Yeah, the aerospace industry was
And they
riddled
knew
with,
it. They knew it. They were just full of it, yes. And they had high-level security clearances and didn't get fired.
Throughout history, it's always been shown that those people who have, the most power or the highest intelligence tend to disregard the narrow little channels that society is generally.
Yeah, that's mentioned in Stranger to Strange Land,
Okay,
too.
and so, you can pretty much count on the elites of a society, whether elites power-wise, political-wise, or economically or intelligence-wise, they tend to see a larger sphere of life than the hoi polloi. And my view is that, well, why should the elites get all the fun? Why not let everybody in on the deal, So,
These are very good questions, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, I was kind of, what was kind of interesting, I know when you've been here before, you've gone through the thing where, usually do the little role-playing thing from Moon as a Harsh Mistress, but another thing also, too, it would be very nice to be sometime a talk here on, or out there, libertarians, on the what it's like on a practical level, what it's like living in a poly community.
We'd be delighted to do that.
we've got a lot of stuff to say about that.
We sure do, yes.
Okay.
Since we really live it.
Because
And there's a community,
it's not theoretical anymore.
and there's a community in Arizona that we're establishing. I'm introducing people to this concept.
How many communities like yours would you expect are there?
We've got a whole bunch of them right here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's hard to estimate.
It's
because a lot of-
proliferating constantly, so that we're meetups and stuff are on the internet.
There's a lot of people just falling into this, without necessarily making a spectacle out of it. They may not even ever come to some group about it. They just may decide, well, hey, let's just live this way. And
Or even use the word for it. They may not even know there's a word to define what they're doing.
Yeah. Although, the internet having more references is sort
How do you file a tax return?
Yeah.
Well, actually, the group marriages who are concerned with that become a corporation. That's how it's done.
or some have become religious.
And you might want to see Proposition 31 by Robert Rimmer, which talks about that. Proposition 31, Robert Rimmer.
So, well, you're both, if I understand, you're both so you're both like a church and corporation sort of thing? Okay, and you're...
Well, Church of All Worlds.
Yeah, Church of All Worlds.
Representative.
And you're, did I understand where you're actually sort of like a minister or priestess or whatever sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that you folks are in a lot into paganism and that sort of thing on there, so
The
yeah.
first neo-pagan religion in the United States was Church of All Worlds, based on strange
that's kind of right along this line. See, let me just fill in a little stuff here because I think it's an interesting comparison. Heinlein created the culture in Stranger in a Strange Land based on the mythical race of Martians.
Yeah.
Who had their own language, who had their own, it's kind of like Eastern mysticism writ large, because they could actually pull off things, like disappearing stuff into thin air that the Indian fakirs could dream about. So they had Valentine Michael Smith be able to do some pretty amazing miracles, right? So, the ties between Indian mysticism and the Jesus, Nazareth, mythos, were drawn. But Tim Zell, who was reading Heinlein's book and thought, wow, this is a great thing, Church of All Worlds.
Who became Otterin and Oberon.
Unfortunately, didn't have an actual Martian society to draw from.
Yeah.
So he said, well, what other religious tradition that can I make the basis of the earthly Church of All Worlds? So he went to the old religion. Which pretty much says, and harm none, do what thou wilt. That's as close to Heinlein's, Valentine Michael Smith as you can get, right? So that's where, Tim, who became Otter, who is now Oberon, took his inspiration.
And he was in contact with Heinlein throughout the founding of this church.
If I may add something to that conversation. Neo, of course, means new, and the new paganism is a product of the 1960s and forward. One of the earliest communal marriage societies that I could find was called the Oneida Colony. Began in upstate New York in 1820 and lasted for 30 odd years, and all the men and women were married to each other. 20 years later, also coming from upstate New York, I don't know why.
It must have been in the water.
Must have been in the water. Yeah, was the genesis of the Mormon religion. Again, both of them were based in a type of Christianity. So our early American alternative marriages were based in the messianic interpretations of individual leaders of certain sects of Christianity. So this type of thing is very, very strongly rooted in the Judeo-Christian mindset, and so this is basically a real break from that tradition in the United States, and kind of interesting because everybody and a lot of people that I have met are some sort of Christian, and in fact take some of their beliefs and underpinnings about how to run a marriage and how to run multiple relationships from their Christian faiths. So you don't have to be a pagan to find a basis to do this kind of stuff.
By the way, Glen and I are writing a book called 50 Years of Polyamory Through Our Eyes. Well, Glen's writing it, and I'm giving him input from my articles and stuff in the newsletter. So that should be very interesting if we can find a publisher that will take it on.
You expect it might come out.
Well, we got to finish writing
Yeah.
it first.
Yeah.
Glen's got a lot of work to do.
I'm thinking it won't be out for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's
My
a
guess. Yeah.
long-term baby, but
Trying to find an agent right now. It would be nicer to have a publisher lined up before the book is finished.
yeah. Well, whoever published Sex at Dawn might be worth a shot.
I'm going to contact them.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I've already contacted Chris Ryan's agent, and she's ignored me. But I have a thick skin.
Sounds interesting. What do you think this will be like, say, 50 years from now? Folks are going through society and everything to develop on this. Well, I'm thinking probably there's going to come a time in the probably not too distant future when this stuff will become formally legal. And that sort of thing.
I'm pretty sure that group marriage is going to become legal certainly within the next 20 years and probably sooner than that.
Yeah.
Now that we have probably legalized gay marriage
Yeah.
all over the United States, I think that's just the next logical step.
Well, I think it starts with the children. I think the effort to educate children with a more open-minded approach, you know, I mean, the things that the conservative Christians are just gnashing their teeth about, of the temerity of sharing with our innocent young people the concept of maybe there are different ways for adults to form romantic relationships other than the one man, one woman and all that. I think that the more children are raised with the possibility that there are other ways to live your life.
What was that song that was sung at our hand fasting that Mike sung for us?
Yeah.
It's the love you leave behind, and whatever you choose to do, you'll still be loved by your family and this sort of thing.
So I think the way that we treat the next generation, okay, what we don't put into their minds, okay, that restricts their thinking, okay, I think that will go a long way towards opening up different avenues and different choices for people. And, I don't think it's the end of of all goodness and light that some people try to say, but I think to me it's the beginning of goodness and light, of a peaceful society that's not run by violent psychopaths. I think if we don't teach our children the language of violence and authoritarianism and force and coercion and obedience because I say so, and instead children learn how to think for themselves and to negotiate and to say who they are and to make their own relationships on a voluntary cooperative basis for mutual benefit, I think more of that will be reflected in the world. And so I think you're right. I think that more, 50 years from now, I think there's a very good possibility that there will be a lot more options for people.
How do your own children react to this? Are they into the same sort
Well,
of thing?
my daughter has lived this lifestyle all of her life, and my son is strictly monogamous and has a wife that is incredibly jealous.
And this might prove to be true for every generation and forever. Back in 1968, an organization formed called Family Synergy, and they formed with the idea of trying to figure out how to put together group marriages. Well, fast forward to about 1978, and I started hanging around with them a little bit as a young man, and they had been around long enough that many of their marriages, two-person marriages, had children, and some of them had started when they started the organization already had children. So their children had been around their parents and their parents' philosophies all the time they were growing up, from little ones to now some of them were teenagers. And I was fascinated talking with those kids that every one of them at a certain time, like from age 13 to 17, went through a phase of saying, I'm never going to do what my parents did. I think they're nuts. Oh, sure, it's a lot of fun having 10 or 12 aunts and uncles to take me places and to do fun things with, extended family, really lots of family. But every child seemed to go through a phase of saying, not me, I'm not going to do it that way. Fast forward another few years, and a certain percentage of those kids then said, my parents might have been onto something, and then returned to thinking about it or including that in their lives. But I think that's a very generational step that happens. Kids have to differentiate themselves from their parents by saying, I'm not going to do it your way.
Is there any possible subject that teenagers don't take that attitude?
I haven't found one.
No, I think there is empirical evidence to show that if children have a larger range of adult role models to learn from and to bounce things off of and to witness interactions between on a familial level, I think this creates a much more well-rounded and much more capable person who's more able to negotiate through life, and based on empathy and being able to understand human interaction rather than just this, and to me, single parenthood, gives the child the least amount of that kind of education. And I think that the old style extended family, where the aunts, uncles, and grandpa lived in close proximity, did offer a lot of that. Although, many of the beliefs of the culture back then were very limited. But in a situation where the child has, parents who are, have additional other adult people around all the time, I think, Glen's observation that, they may go through a phase of, because they still see in the culture, this monogamous jealousy stuff, and so they identify with people their age who are in the media who are doing this complete monogamy thing. But then they have to look back and say, yeah, but my family wasn't that way. They weren't jealous. They didn't get mad at each other, So it's like when they get a little bit of perspective, then then they can realize, well, wait a minute, this actually works pretty well. Okay, and even if they do choose to have a monogamous relationship, it becomes a choice. So
I remember my son saying when he was 8 years old that when he grew up, he was going to be monogamous. He was going to make his wife sleep in separate bedrooms.
And what did happen?
Well, he really became monogamous. He got married.
That's why the right went up. Okay.
But he married a very beautiful woman, you know, and he's a pretty striking, handsome guy himself. So, you know.
He married a top model
Ah.
who was also a spokeswoman for the Hispanic community and so forth.
Ah.
She is utterly jealous and monogamous.
Okay.
He doesn't live my lifestyle. But he feels that I have a right to live it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, if we create a society of people who at least are willing to let other people do their own thing, this is a tremendous step forward. You know.
Having myself grown up in that kind of a life, what I think the real advantage is as you said, they get a chance to make their own decision. But when they do go to walk into a relationship, they're not going to walk in with the assumption that it's going to be monogamous.
Yeah.
And so they're going to have that communication with somebody before it starts, which I have done with both my wives. Before when I got the first 2 times I got married, it was just, okay, what kind of marriage are we going to have? And you don't just make that assumption, and then halfway, a few years into it, you think, well, wait a minute, this isn't the marriage I thought we were doing.
Yeah. No, my current.
And his dad was actually poly, which gave him something he could, look at.
My current lady friend, I told her up front that, I'm not a monogamous person. I believe in, I mean, I met her because, we were both interested in the liberty movement, where we found that the limiting monopoly of the state, is unethical. So it's like, well, if a forced monopoly in one area is unethical, then a forced monopoly in any area would be equally unethical, right? So a monopoly of, I can only have one, provider of, personal romantic relationship, who decided that? That seems rather arbitrary.
So Athena and I have shared water and are close ourselves. And when they visit, if she's with them, and she's not right now just because she's working, but we all stay in the same bed and enjoy each other's company, and it's lovely.
Ah.
And she came along with us on our 20th wedding anniversary, and we celebrated it. And she took pictures. No.
When you say took pictures, let's be
TMI.
clear, okay?
TMI.
In the restaurant.
She took pictures of us
You
dancing
can
and
Google them
doing
on the
that
internet. Yes.
in the restaurant that we were in on our wedding night and all that. It was really beautiful. She's a sweet lady.
No, I really respect that she gets it about, government, and she equally gets it about personal relationships. They're, it's all the same continuum. Are you at choice, or do you have to submit, your judgment to someone else's arbitrary control? And once you realize it's all the same thing, it's just government is just that much writ large, but so unless you've got something else, I think, I don't know what time it is, but I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Probably get on the road because
Yeah.
David has to be up super early and
It's midnight? Oh, no.
it's 10. We need to get on home.
Yeah.
If, I hope everyone has gotten what they wanted.
Oh, and there are books here, so please
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
those.
Don't make me take all those back with me.
And thank you for hosting us.
Yes.
This was fun.
Our pleasure.